somos a mudança.
Wir sind die Veränderung.
For me, the meaning resides in nature.
Alles ist miteinander verbunden.
O planeta est isolado.
Und wir Menschen sind Teil dieses Ökosystems.
Nós somos a floresta.
Wir sind der Wald.
I can no longer afford to just sit and wait for someone else to step up.
There has never been a time when a single individual had more power in the history of our planet.
I was born with this huge passion for animals and for wildlife, with desire to protect them. And I want to fight back for them.
Und dieser Traum bewegt, glaube ich, immer mehr Menschen auf dieser Welt.
By taking peaceful action, you make change.
Follow your heart, break the rules,
and make history.
So law has created this problem and law can amend it.
Die Erde heizt sich auf. Wir sterben bald aus.
When you live in exceptional times, you need people who break rules.
The changes are so much faster than we predicted.
Macht endlich etwas gegen die Klimakrise.
Wer schaut schon in einen Massenstall hinein?
Dass jetzt die UN erkannt hat, dass Tierschutz wirklich ein Gamechanger ist.
Und jene Dörfer überschwemmen, jene Wälder brennen und jene letzten Reserven auf Erden verderben.
I don't think the planet stands a chance if we allow that corruption to proceed.
Und gegen dieses System aufzutreten, das ist etwas, was wir alle gemeinsam tun müssen.
Mas nós também somos a solução.
Aber wir sind auch die Lösung.
What we give our children is so important, to be outdoors, to be barefoot, to touch the soil.
Wenn die 900 Menschen hier 5 weitere inspirieren.
Damit wir gemeinsam irgendetwas ändern können.
Um wirklich was zu bewegen, muss man manchmal wirklich auf den Tisch hauen.
You don't have to be black, you don't have to be Austrian, you don't have to be German, you don't have to be anything. All you have to be is a human being that shows up.
Neon Green Network begrüßt Sie zu den Erdgesprächen 2025.
Schönen Abend.
A wonderful good evening. Hello. My 5-year-old son gave me this wristband today, and he said, "Daddy, this is for you today. Wear it today." And well, as a father, of course, you won't argue with your son, so I'll wear it. And in the course of the day, I became aware that it's more than a fashion accessory. It is a very honest and sometimes terrifying symbol that I'm wearing on my wrist, because this high quality, probably CO2-free plastic string of pearls from the kindergarten is a symbol of why I'm here today. Because my passion to fight for climate change or to combat climate change is that I want to look my kids in the eye and say, well, we've tried it, we've lived a life that we were satisfied with, and we still never forgot about your future. But I can't manage it every day. Sometimes I take decisions where I know, even beforehand, well, this wasn't really me as a role model for fighting against climate change. And sometimes I feel that I'm betraying my kids with all of these decisions that are suboptimal. And this thought hurts. If you're seriously dealing with these issues, then you know how you have the feeling you can never do enough. There's always more than you can do. And at the same time, at least you feel that you need to keep your mental stability. So trying to be somewhere in between, well, responsibility and impotence. And well, this is why these Earth Talks are so important, because we are not alone. We are many. And our power lies not in us being perfect, but that we never stop trying. That's what we need to remind each other of. And the success of these efforts will be showcased on the stage today. So I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and a cordial welcome to the Earth Talks 2025. For all those who are here for the first time and for all those who've been here before but have forgotten how it works, let me give you a short overview. What are we planning to do in the coming minutes? We're going to hear 3 presentations of inspiring personalities. We are going to discuss what we heard on the couch. We're going to experience an art performance, and then we'll conclude the Earth Talks with the fact that you start talking to each other on this planet Earth. And we have food and beverages for you behind this curtain. So that's our plan. At the beginning, we'd like to welcome our guests of honor. Thank you for coming, First Lady Doris Schmiedauer and Fellow President Alexander van der Bellen. In the first couple of rows, there are so many people who we ought to welcome. I would like to thank all those who are here from the various organizations that are supporting the Earth Talks, a lot of representatives of NGOs. Well, I'd like to thank all of you. We are so grateful to you for your support for the Earth Talks. And if you've ever seen earthtalks.net, our website, you know inspiration as a superpower. Well, this is what you'll get here. Plenty of inspiration, and we'll now bring our inspiration superheroes onto the stage. We'd like to welcome our speakers. She's a lawyer and spokesperson of Greenpeace for Social and Environmental Justice, Baro Vicenta Ragavat. Get comfortable. We did have a little chat. So you said, what's the vibe like? Well, even though you didn't really do a lot, you get a huge round of applause. That's exactly how it is here. And we also have Valerie Huber here, an actress and an activist. And she's also an author. And we have a designer and co-founder of the School for Moral Ambition, Harald Dunning. A cordial welcome. You can now relax, because now we'll listen to somebody else, because now we'll have our man who takes over the patronage of the Earth Talks. And patronage, well, I think this is easily said, but what does it mean, the patronage that people are always talking about? Well, actually, to sum it up, it's a symbolic support of an event. And you find this everywhere, people saying, yes, that's great, I will be your patron. But here at the Earth Talks, it's completely different. This is much more than just a symbolic thumbs up, because the man who is our patron, he has been with the Earth Talks for many, many years. This is our head of state, Alexander van der Bellen. Neon Green Network welcomes Federal President Alexander van der Bellen. Now, I finally know what being a patron is all about. It was correct what you said. Dear EARTHtalks, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We are many. That is the focus of these Earth Talks. And look around. Well, how many are we? 500 or 700, something around that. I did a literature research trying to find out how many people it takes to get something started. Well, actually, it's not all that many. There are investigations trying to find out what the critical mass of people has to be that a society needs in order to trigger change. What is your guess? 5, 10, 30%? We're not talking about political categories. This is a study that is neutral in terms of power or violence. This covers revolutions with violence and also non-violent changes. Well, I read that it's about 3.5 to 4% of the population that needs to actively take part for such a broad societal movement to get started. That isn't a whole lot. So 3.5 or 4%, well, some regimes have been toppled with 3.5% of the population. That's the first 2 rows of people, right? But it's different when it comes to technical innovation. What is the threshold for something to, well, succeed when it comes to technical innovations? For example, video cassettes or DVDs, or, well, they had cell phones with buttons on them, or now we have smartphones. Well, major technological changes. And for that to, well, succeed, it's enough to have 20%. So 1/5 of all people need to use a new technology to make sure that it is unstoppable or that it's hard to stop. So let's take a look at what this means for us. Meanwhile, 1/5 of all vehicles sold globally are electric vehicles. Electric vehicles. Wind and solar energy are cheaper than fossil fuels in many countries. Battery technology is making rapid progress. Globally, we're investing more and more in renewables. And we are using these technologies increasingly because they pay off. That means we're in the midst of an irreversible transformation. And now we just need politicians who support this rather than blocking it. And we need an economy that doesn't see this as an obstacle, but as a stepping stone, as a trampoline of sorts. Ladies and gentlemen, we keep hearing about these tilting points. Whoever deals with climate emergencies, well, knows about these tipping points, and we know what these can mean. Well, that really creates fear. But what about the major tipping points that encourage us? Don't get me wrong. There are good reasons to be worried. We currently have a global warming of, what's the latest results globally? Global warming? Wrong. 1.6 degrees Celsius. 1.62 to be precise. That doesn't exclude that some countries might be clearly above that. For example, Austria or the Eastern Alps, well, the temperature increase has been twice as high. So our warming is 3.1 degrees. That doesn't mean that it has to stay that way in the coming 20 years, that global warming will proceed twice as fast here than in the rest of the world, but so far that's the way it has been. So these are reasons to worry, but there are just as many reasons to be confident and optimistic. For example, we're here at the EARTHtalks. Year after year, we are confronted with the same problems. We are confronted with another problem, that is preaching to the converted. At least I believe that you're all among the converted. If there are some people who have not been converted yet, I think the male form is enough. Don't need to include women here. But I believe that year after year, there are more and more people who've seen the light, who've realized that we are dealing with real problems, that the climate movement is not an ideological movement, but, or at least not only, I don't mind ideology, but it's not only an ideology, but it's an economically reasonable movement. It's reasonable that we do something with global warming because that helps us to survive. I don't really talk about protecting the climate. Or do I care about the climate? We need to protect ourselves from the impact of climate change. That's the problem. All things considered, we do see change. Let's stay with the example that we had previously. The first 2 rows are enough to bring about a revolution if they only try hard enough. So together we can bring about change more easily, also at the global level. And one more thing is important, talking about the global level. We should not think in terms of black and white, the good and the bad, also when it comes to the climate crisis. Let's take a look at China. China is on the vanguard when it comes to new technologies and when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I think globally they are the biggest emitter. So is China a polluter or only a climate polluter, or are they the big innovator, or are they both somehow? I found with astonishment that China, meanwhile, year after year, expands its wind and solar potential twice as fast as the entire rest of the world. Nowhere else are there so many patents filed for green technologies. So they're both. China is still the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, and it's foreseeable, and even I am going to experience this, that they will become global market leader in the area of green technologies. So it's not so easy. The first glance is often misleading. If you only check out the emission numbers, then you may reach the wrong conclusions. So if we work together, and if we take responsibility for the future of the planet, we can manage. We should not work against each other. We should bring about change by working with each other. We need this feeling of belonging together across the globe. And I need to read the book. What was this book about the moral ambition? Originally I come from the economy, and I think you can tell from time to time I'm trying not to work at the moral level, but at the simple level of reason. But, well, with reason you only have so much success. I noticed that as well. And it has been mentioned that children and grandchildren count. We are not only doing this for ourselves, we want to pass something on that's worth living in. We want to pass on the world that's worth living in for our grandchildren. That's why we are committed. So there's 3.5% of the people, if they can manage to bring about a revolution, and if 20% is enough for new technologies to succeed and prevail, well, just think about what can be achieved if not everybody, but a sufficient number of people participate. At least all those who want to improve the world, change the world for the better. There is a saying that is ascribed to Hannah Arendt, but it cannot be proven. Quote, whenever people come together, something big will happen. Well, so our responsibility is that it shouldn't only be something big, but also something good and beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Federal President Alexander von der Bellen. We've heard it. We shouldn't think in terms of black and white. And the next subject that we are going to talk about also requires more differentiated thinking, because the COP30 is imminent, where the governments across the world want to find a compromise. And of course, the global political situation doesn't exactly constitute a good portent. But anyway, of course, sometimes people want to stick their head in the sand. But, and this is a big but, there's so many different perspectives, and we have invited some of those perspectives here. From all parts of the world, we collected different messages that encourage us and that show that all over the world, people are trying to achieve a bit more climate-friendly future. The first message comes directly from South Africa, from the former director of Greenpeace and the former Secretary General of Amnesty International, Kuminadu.
Dear friends and colleagues, we are at a crossroads in human history. Here in Africa, we feel the brutal injustice of the climate crisis most acutely, though we did least to cause it. This is why we fight for climate justice and a just phase-out of fossil fuels everywhere. The scientific consensus is clear. 86% of the carbon choking our atmosphere comes from oil, coal and gas. Relying on them is building our future on sinking sand. But from Pacific Islands to courageous fossil fuel producing nations like Colombia, a global movement is rising. You are not alone. We are a community of millions demanding a funded, fair transition through a fossil fuel treaty. My call to you is this. Find a support network around you. Get involved in a local structure. Join the fight globally online. Together, we are unstoppable. The pessimism that justifiably emerges from our analysis and lived experiences must be met by the optimism of our thought, our action, our creativity, and our humanity. Asante sana, merci beaucoup, muchas gracias, thank you very much.
Bevor wir jetzt gleich in unseren ersten
Now, before we continue with the first talk, let me give you some organizational remarks. You've seen the keynotes. These will be in English. So if you'd like to have support, well, you're welcome. You can get a headset where we have simultaneous interpretation, and all those who are in the stream, we have the stream in the original and also a German and English stream. So you can switch back and forth, whatever you prefer. And don't worry if at some point you say, well, now it's really hard to listen to the original. No worries, you can always get a headset for interpretation. Okay, so let's get started with the first keynote. And, well, it's very easy because we just saw Kuminadu, who is a renowned activist for climate justice. And our first speaker also stands for justice, and here she is. Paravichandra Raghavert is a lawyer and spokesperson for social and environmental justice at Greenpeace, Germany. She studied law in Hamburg and Rio de Janeiro, and has advised the German government as an independent expert. As a co-founder of the Climate Clinic, she volunteers to support climate activists and NGOs on issues related to climate and law. Together with around 54,600 co-plaintiffs, the Greenpeace campaigner, together with German Watch, filed the Zukunftsklage, the future lawsuit, with the Constitutional Court. And this is a constitutional complaint for a climate just future. So this year, in 2025, she published her first book, No Future is Not a Solution. Together with newsfluencer Fabian Grischkat, Baro embodies the courage of a generation that is challenging the status quo through legal means. Neon Green Network presents Paravichandra Raghavert. It is so wonderful to be here. I'm very pleased you just asked, what are the vibes like? The vibes are excellent, and I have to tell you, you here in Vienna, you have a federal president who finds really beautiful words for the challenges of our time. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you about our future. The future is one of those words of which there are many, where all people know what it is about, but everybody understands something else. So we need to focus on what's behind the words, because I'm convinced that we are going to argue about few words, and we're going to argue even more about future and what it means. This is why we want to bring up facts, figures, and stories, narratives, and impressions so that we can leave from here stronger. I have a question. Who is a Taylor Swift fan? No? Okay. Well, slowly but surely, hands are rising. Okay, there's a couple of Taylor Swift fans here in the room. I have to tell the people who are not Taylor Swift fans, well, are we living in an era of democracy? Well, let's take a look back, go back a couple of years, and then you can see the share of the global population that lives in an autocracy. So in 2003, it was 50%. Let's go forward to 2023, and it's already 71% of the global population that lives in autocracies. And a few more figures that I brought along, because in such an era of non-democracy, well, how are people doing? How are young people doing who have a lot of future ahead of them? And the figures are a bit problematic here. 63% of young people are afraid because of climate change. Only 19% believe that their own actions can bring about change, and only 9.3% are completely carefree among the people who vote for the first time. So it doesn't look very good if especially young people look to the future. But it's not surprising, because planet Earth is burning. Well, I think most people in the room already know that much, but I think sometimes we need to be honest about why we talk about the things we talk about. I think we should say it's enough. Enough is enough. Let's reclaim the future. Well, it's easily said, but how can we do it? How can we reclaim the future? And where do you reclaim the future, and who can do that? Well, let's start in a place where many people, for one or the other reason and in one or the other way, can be found, namely on the streets. Next question. Well, we didn't have so many Taylor Swift fans, but maybe more people will react to this question by raising their hand. At least it's conceivable. In the past 2 years, who was out on the streets protesting against something? Okay, so there's more people here on protest marches rather than at Swift concerts. Okay, so who asked what was the result of me protesting for the climate, against right-wing extremism, for more democracy or whatever? Who has asked themselves the question? Okay, a similar number of people. I also asked myself the question, and now I have brought along a couple of figures that may give you hope. Because 53% of people who attended a protest rally will discuss more political issues in their everyday lives. And it's also the case that 23%, almost 1 out of 4 people, will intervene when they see discrimination happening in their everyday lives. And 77%, so more than 3 out of 4 people, feel that they are part of a bigger whole, a larger movement. And I think that in a day and age where so many people feel so alone, where people believe what I think, well, nobody else thinks that way, or what I say, well, this doesn't really have an impact, but when it comes to the people who are not there at the protest rallies, that's the people we want to reach, right? And here we see that in the weeks after climate protest marches, 1.2% more people start thinking about climate change. This may not sound like a whole lot, but if you think about how often there are such protests and how you can bring about change, well, this is quite a sizable number, because among those there are also people who had never thought about these things before. So, briefly put, congratulations if you were out in the street. That is worth it. But maybe not enough so. And that takes us to a different place where most people maybe aren't so often. I am there from time to time because you have heard I'm a legal expert, and sometimes, since often it is not enough what we are achieving through protests or other forms of activism, sometimes people take things to court. I have brought along something. This is from the Federal Constitutional Court in Germany, and the Federal Constitutional Court decided that the basic law requires Germany that freedoms protected by fundamental rights be safeguarded over time, and that opportunities for freedom be distributed proportionately across generations. So that is a relatively complicated legal sentence, but what's behind this is a completely different way of thinking about the future in law.
Because classically enough, and it's been like that in most places all over the world, we have the right to have freedom, and so in law it is being stipulated what can be done, what can I do, what are the activities that I can do without restricting my fellow human beings. For example, if you think about smokers, and especially for smoking, you have to find legal stipulations for the public area, for the public space, for the private space. But activities of people and the time dimension with regard to the future, this is something that is required by the climate crisis, and this is what we have been fighting for in the climate movement in 2021 in Germany before the Supreme Court, where we heard that law must secure the freedom of the future, and it cannot be that people acting selfishly will be threatening the freedoms of people in the future when it comes to becoming active. There is another thing I would like to tell you. This has been absolutely groundbreaking in Germany. There is a right to school education. You might think, well, school education, this has been around forever, but there is a right to education. And why do I want to tell you about this? Because education is absolutely essential when it comes to helping people, when it comes to equipping people with the tools to brace themselves for the future, but also for this very reason here. So this is me. This is the mini me, of course. I have changed, but this was me way back then when I had just learned to read and write. I brought you this picture because these two decisions on climate and on education before the German Supreme Court, these decisions, they have been reached by minors. There were pupils, young people, children who said, well, maybe I do not understand a lot about law, but I understand what goes wrong in today's world, and I truly understand that I have rights, and that the things that are happening now, we have to prevent them. They are not right. And one of these young persons, this is something I would like to share with you, approached me in 2021. This was a 14-year-old guy. We were in the metro, and he said, Baro, you are studying law. Maybe you could, well, do you think it will be worthwhile to start a lawsuit against the German government? I said, well, I do not know if this will work out. And he said, well, yes, I just took a quick look at the Constitution. Maybe you can help me understand. Yes, let's see what I can do. He was one of the many younger people who had embarked on this pathway together with organizations such as Greenpeace, with lawyers and also with others. But at the beginning there were young people who felt something is going wrong. They thought it would not be enough to take to the streets, and they embarked on another pathway. And one of the most groundbreaking decisions over the last decades was reached, and at the beginning we didn't know what the outcome would be. It was, the result that we reached was absolutely phenomenal, which goes to show, and we already heard about that, sometimes it is sufficient if people develop a feeling and if they have a passion and if they stand up and say, let's do something. Even if we do not know what the outcome will be, even if we do not know what the result will be, who is going to help us, we want to do it because we think it's the right thing to do, and along the way we are going to find allies. So, such activities can be developed into a total work of art, things that can shape our societies for years and for decades. And because all this was so nice and efficient? No, just kidding. Because climate policy has not reached the results it was supposed to reach, and because I think that it's great that we live in a state that is coined by rule of law. So we have seen that many have joined us in our fight, and I brought with me a few examples. We are not only talking about young people, we're talking about young people, old people, taking to the streets, going to court, joining forces, saying, we have an idea. So we have the climate senior citizens, female senior citizens in Switzerland fighting against global warming, and they won. They took the cause to the European Court of Justice, and they prevailed. Climate protection also means a protection of human rights, and similar things have been achieved by students from Vanuatu for many years. This group of young people went to climate conference, to the COP conferences, and said, we need a decision coming from the global international Court of Justice. It's very important to see that climate protection is not implemented in a way that is sufficient. The International Court of Justice decided that 1.5 degrees Celsius is the relevant threshold, and that this is the basis of human rights. And there was a group of young people that believed in something, and they actually never gave up. And this is what also we have been doing in Germany. So when it comes to climate protection, so the sky is the limit, and now we've come up with something else. And we said, when we go to the Constitutional Court for the next time, then we are going to invite everyone to join in. 54,584 people joined us in our fight, and they instigated a lawsuit, a constitutional lawsuit against the federal government. This is absolutely important, because people are courageous enough to take their rights into their own hands. And for the first time, they bring forward arguments to the Constitutional Court of Justice. We need climate protection that works for people in the rural areas, for those more advanced in age, that are restricted in terms of mobility. We need climate protection for people with disabilities. We need climate protection for people who are not that well off, because climate protection can only be done if we take people on board. But of course, this is absolutely important. This argument is so important, and it must be the driver for us thinking about ways and means to bring about socially just climate protection. And because this is not answered sufficiently by representatives of politics, we are taking this matter to court once again. So maybe the protests on the street, well, this is something that is more relatable than the lawsuits I have been talking about, because this is something that you don't do every day. But why did I mention all of this? Because this is an example of how people take the future into their own hands. People say, we want to do something. We want to brace ourselves for these difficult times at a global level, at a national level. We want to improve things. We want to take these tiny little seeds. We want to see them develop. We want to write a new concept that nobody wants to hear about, because we think that there will be a moment when we can take it out of the drawer again, and that we can put it to good use. And people defying difficult times by joining forces, by finding allies, are so important when it comes to fostering the climate resilient networks, because this fosters hope. It's so important to rely upon one another. We have to know whom to turn to when the going gets tough. To summarize all of this, we are the future. Everywhere we are, and everywhere where people come together, everywhere where tiny seeds are sown, where people go to court, where people are raising their voice, where people take to the streets, where they write books, or where they tell their stories in books and make them available, where people raise their voice, or where they are totally silent, or here, where people turn into superheroes, where they come together, link up, and strengthen one another in order to shape the future. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this. And I hope that we will engage in interesting conversations afterwards, and I hope that some tiny seedlings can be sown in order to create the future. The future will come anyway. The question is, what do we do with it? And we all have the potential to make the future more livable, more environmentally sound, and more socially just. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baro, for your input. It was truly impressive to see this wonderful presentation. There was also a tiny dramaturgical element to it, to hear this wonderful presentation. So we also heard a little baby crying. This was also very interesting. So, but this was nothing of my doing. So we want to talk about the things that we just heard, and we are going to get another guest on the podium from the Institute of Law and Governments in Vienna, Professor Birgit Hollaus. Hi, Birgit. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, we heard a little bit about the successes in court, that very often climate activists prevail. But is it worthwhile protecting the climate in court? A very mundane question, I know. Well, I would put it like that. It depends. What do you mean by worthwhile? Because there are many different kinds of impact that you can reach with such climate lawsuits. So the fact alone that we are sitting here and talking about this topic already generates a big impact. I do not know how many of those here today had heard about the term before, or who had known that also courts are actors, are stakeholders when it comes to this topic. And if you have reached this goal, this already constitutes a big impact. And the examples that you have cited, that it's not only a phenomenon that we have seen in Germany or Europe-wide, that is a global phenomenon, and this goes to show that this development has really reached an impact, and it will be ever more difficult to find counter-arguments. Of course, climate protection is also very, very important for courts. But does it also have an impact on policy makers, or has there rather been a reluctant approach to this? I'll try to answer in a very diplomatic way. It gets ever more difficult to find counter-arguments, also from an Austrian point of view, after the court ruling that you told us about the climate senior citizens. This was a case from Switzerland. It was about Switzerland, the state of Switzerland, who had not pursued climate policy, who had been lagging behind in this regard with regards to international obligations. Austria is in a similar situation. We have to be quite honest about this, to which adds that in Austria, access to law is markedly more difficult, and this lack of activity in climate protection very often is not taken seriously enough. And here we have to make pertinent decisions. Do we need such a kind of access? What about the lawyers' bubble? So are you quite exotic in the lawyers' bubble? Are you the wild ones among your fellow lawyers? So sometimes also the audience has trouble understanding me, because sometimes I speak dialect. So it has become more acceptable in polite society to be a lawyer and to deal also with such questions. A few years ago, when I said I concentrate on environmental law, I very often saw colleagues frowning, but meanwhile I've seen that people who are not lawyers really approve of what I do and really understand that environmental protection also relates to law. Law is an instrument that shapes our society, and also vice versa. Because we go to the polls, we elect the politicians that govern us, and we also have to, of course, fight for the implementation of law. Borrow do you also have an answer to this question? When I started with my studies, so my family, the family of my mother comes from Ecuador. It has been the first country in the world that has anchored the rights of nature in the federal constitution, a right to a good life in an intact environment. And I monitored a lawsuit being brought to court coming from an Indian community, and I also wanted to do something similar in Germany. Many people thought that I was crazy. They asked me, why do you study law if you are interested if you are that much interested in environmental protection? And then the big crisis come along. Then Fridays for Future came along. There were demonstrations every Friday, and in Germany, Friday, so every Friday, there was a sample exam that we did in preparation for the exams for 1.5 years. And then I wrote an email and said, so let's take to the streets on Friday instead of taking the exams. And people said, you will have a hard time ever completing your studies if you go about it like that. And 1 year later, my colleagues called me. This was in 2021. They said, well, you just prevailed in the Federal Constitutional Court. Could you please give me some explanations, because it could be relevant for our exams? I said, yes, I can do that. And then this was a subject of the exam, and the protests on the street. These were the best preparation for all future lawyers for their final exams. And then we sat around the table and said, so I was not alone. I was not plowing alone a furrow. And we talked about this topic, and today there are so many focal areas. There are so many dissertations written about climate transformation. So climate protection has arrived in German law. There are so many legal experts concentrating on environmental law. It's about resolving in conflicts of interest, and I think this is something that legal experts should absolutely be able to do. On this stage, time and again, there are presentations where at the end there is a real call to action. Do something, join in, and I'm not quite sure, is this a call to action? Will you all take matters to court? Should you all start studying law? No, I would rather say engage in conversations, transcend your specialist disciplines, and think about ways and means to put your know-how to good use and to become active. And of course, this deserves a round of applause, so thank you very much. So, of course, this deserves really a big round of applause. There are also many young people here, many pupils, many school students, and I think this is absolutely cool that they've joined in. So if someone is not sure, well, what does it take in order to be really good at the jobs that you do? Well, you need perseverance, of course. Creativity is totally important. I think this has been proven by the things that you do and by the way you approach things. Being a lawyer is not a bone-dry thing, so you can be creative, you can shape things. So it's like playing with Play-Doh, so you can really develop a hands-on approach. Any other skills, competences that good lawyers should have? Listening is extremely important, being a really good listener. And maybe this is also part of the answer to your previous question. Does everyone has to go to the court? No, I don't think so. This isn't the way it's supposed to be, but people should develop an awareness about the ways and means that are at our disposal. And sometimes, well, some ideas for such lawsuits spring from the fact that people just engage in conversations and talk to each other. Part of the constitutional lawsuits that we had lodged with Greenpeace is about low barrier or barrier-free climate neutral mobility, and this came about because a friend paid me a visit, Sabrina, and when she came to me, we're just in the process of preparing the lawsuit at Greenpeace, and she didn't know anything about it, and she couldn't know about it, of course, and then she approached me, and I asked her, "Hey, Sabrina, how about your journey here?" And she was not quite sure. And she said, "Well, I know you are concentrating on climate protection, which I think is really important, but today I didn't really feel good and I couldn't take the metro, I couldn't take the bus, I had to take the car." So Brina suffers from a chronic disability, and she said, "I would rather like to travel in a environmentally sound way." And this kept me wide awake. And then I took a close look at the Constitution. So things that you do when you can't really fall asleep. And I found things like equal participation, freedom, mobility, and I thought the things that Sabrina told me don't have to do with the things that are anchored in the Constitution. And the next day I called our lawyer and said that we also need to fight for barrier-free mobility in terms of climate protection, our lawsuit, and he was totally flabbergasted. And then the lawyers brought forward argument, and Sabrina became one of those who took this matter to court, and she told her stories. So it's very important to listen. It's very important to ask ourselves, what do people need? And I think this is a skill that many lawyers should actually master. I listened well. Thank you very much to Birgit Hollaus. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for your contribution.
I'm Joanna Sustenta, and I come from the Philippines, a country that is no stranger to the climate crisis. In 2013, I lost my parents, my eldest brother, my sister-in-law, and my 3-year-old nephew to Super Typhoon Haiyan. Thousands of families in my community lost everything too. Loved ones, homes, livelihoods. 12 years have passed, and the climate injustice we lived through has not ended. It is still happening to this day. Every year, the storms grow stronger. Just last year, we were hit by 6 typhoons in a single month. And in the past few months, back-to-back storms and floods have devastated our communities. So how can we ever recover if we are constantly trying to survive one disaster after another? People call us resilient, but resilience without justice is just survival, and we deserve more than that. We deserve systems that protect us, leaders who have the courage to stand up against the industries and systems fueling this crisis. But the stories of loss and struggle I carry are not ours alone. Because this isn't just about the climate. In Palestine, in Balochistan, in Sudan, in West Papua, and in so many communities under occupation and systemic oppression, people are being displaced, starved, killed and silenced. And we cannot look away, because there is no climate justice without human rights. We can't fight to protect the planet while ignoring the people being erased from it. So let's keep sharing our stories and demanding action from those in power. Let's hold them accountable and create a world we and the future generations deserve. Because a better world isn't just a vision. It is already taking root in the hands of those who refuse to look away. And that is where hope begins. Damo nga salamat, haiyo nga tanan.
Joanna war übrigens.
In 2019, Joanna was a speaker here at the EARTHtalks, and before we continue with our agenda, we'd now like to say goodbye to Alexander van der Bellen, to stay with the superhero narrative. Well, the country needs him, so he's on his way. Thank you very much, Alexander van der Bellen, for the inauguration of our event. So Joanna was here in 2019 as a speaker in this network of activists that are part of this EARTHtalks community is getting ever bigger, and now it's going to get even bigger because we'll move on to the next talk. Valerie Huber is an actress, an activist, and an authoress. She grew up in Uganda, Ivory Coast, and Washington, D.C. She has a global view of responsibility and justice. She became known by a Netflix series and Chasing the Lion. She's a UNICEF ambassador, and in 2025 she published FOMO Sapiens. Are we missing the whole world? She's asking, what are we losing if we don't change anything? And she talks about consumption, climate protection, and social responsibility. With clarity and passion, she asks to not only consume, but to shape the world for our future and for our future generations. Neon Green Network presents Valerie Huber. Thank you, and a wonderful good evening. I'm very, very pleased to be here in a group with so many inspiring people. And how often are you in a room full of people who are enthusiastic about protecting the climate? So, Angie, I think I have to say a big thank you to you. You and your team, you are the real climate action heroes. So, once again, Angie, you are incredible. Actually, my generation should be doing really well. We are healthy, we're educated, and, well, we're more secure than ever before. We have so many opportunities, so many privileges and freedoms as never before. But we're still not happy. How could we be? There's lots and lots of crises, wars, genocide, artificial intelligence, the super rich who are deciding about our fate, and of course climate change that is racing towards us, and the politicians that are not doing anything against climate change and are full of apathy. Jane Goodall said, "This is the darkest time since the Second World War." So this beautiful facade that our parents had envisaged for us is now crumbling. And yes, we're in an incredible crisis, an economic crisis, a societal crisis, but first and foremost in a human crisis, the crisis of humanity. Homo sapiens turned into Homo economicus, and now a FOMO sapiens, as I like calling it, a fearful, estranged person. We are so estranged from nature, our fellow human beings, and ourselves. We have become little digital monsters that spend 10 hours a day on the internet, and we think that we are missing out. So FOMO, with the fear of missing out. We believe that others have a better life, a better partner, a more perfect vacation. And now that we have the fear of missing everything, we miss the most important thing that we have, namely the here and now, the valuable moment of being here and now. So the emotional stability of young people is under a lot of strain. Let's not think about the system or the errors inherent in the system. We just take and consume without ever giving back. We exploit and we weed out without thinking about the consequences. We live in a surplus of consumption, overconsumption. And what is the purpose? To end poverty or inequality or to end climate crisis? No, it isn't. The purpose of our current system is still growth, profit maximization, and enriching oneself, no matter at whose costs this happens. But growth without limits on a planet with limited resources is simply impossible. Every child knows that. Our politicians still fail to see it. So we continue to grow, we continue to consume, and we pump CO2 into the atmosphere as if there were no tomorrow. And the climate crisis has arrived here as well. We have seen major floods and forest fires, Los Angeles burned down. And the true losers of climate crisis, the true victims, that's not us, that's people in the global south who are sitting on their dried out fields and are in vain waiting for rain. It's not coming. They're already losing the very foundations of their lives, their livelihoods, and, well, they drown in the Mediterranean trying to escape this misery. And we were already overburdened with the refugee crisis of 2015. According to the UN, the home of 200 million people will have vanished in the sea due to sea level rise. So where should these people go? And we have to be quite clear about the fact that all of this is happening because we are enjoying our standard of living and the luxury that we have, captured. So we are all responsible for this injustice. 1% of the global population causes as much CO2 as the poorer 2/3 of the world. According to Greenpeace, every day 130 species are extinguished, or eradicated forever. Every 13 seconds, a child dies from the consequences of hunger. Jean Seeger would say this is murder because we failed to help them. And we would have the resources in order to feed everybody on this planet, but we don't have enough for everybody's greed. According to Oxfam, only 2.9% of the military budgets of the G7 would be necessary to eliminate world hunger, just like that. 3% of the military budget of 7 states. That's perverse. But the political will is missing. We are therefore the only species that is destroying the very basis of its livelihood. We would have the means to prevent it, but we consciously decide not to do so. That's not only very short-sighted, it is rather dumb, I think. So let us say that our current system, this neoliberal capitalism and climate protection, is a contradiction in terms. Actually, it should not be called climate protection. We don't have to protect the climate. The climate will be around in centuries. It's about protecting ourselves. So let's stop with this negative statements. What can we do going forward? We know we can't return to business as usual. That's not an option. The Club of Rome, more than 50 years ago, made a forecast that if you continue on this pathway, that there will be a societal collapse. Unless we transform our societies, the social tensions and the fighting over resources will be much stronger than the impact of the climate crisis. So what we need is a giant leap. A giant leap forward. That's the only scenario out of the many that were analyzed by the Club of Rome that would ensure the survival of humanity. And this constitutes a huge opportunity for us. For the first time, we have all the means and technologies in order to design the future the way we want to have it. And every sector, the transport sector, the apparel and clothing industry, agriculture, they all need to be revolutionized and rethought. We need a system where people are at the center, and not profits, not growth, not the economy. We need a circular economy. We need to move away from this overconsumption and swiping that makes people interchangeable. We need to reuse things, recycle, and there are already models and ideas how to do that. Scientists and climate experts agree there are two possible scenarios for the future. One is green growth, that is to say, we stay with a GDP growth, but based on technology, so green growth. The other method is a bit more radical, and that would bring about a radical system change. And there are new concepts, I'm sure you've heard about them. 3 of them are degrowth, that's from Christian Felber, the economy of the common good, and the donut economics. So you may have heard about planetary growth. So donut economics says that there are 2 circles where, well, we should not go beyond. So at the top is the planetary borders, and we need to try to stay within these borders and limits. And then there's hunger and poverty that we need to try to move into the donut. And unfortunately, we heard this year that there's already 6 or even 7 limits that have been exceeded. So what can we do as individuals? I think it is really important for us to assume responsibility. We, the privileged people here in the West, we have everything. We are living in such luxury. It is really our responsibility to do even more, not for ourselves, but for all the other people who don't have these options. It's about morality. It's about a return to solidarity. We have forgotten what it means to be humane. The climate crisis and the social problems, unfortunately, are feminine issues. It is mostly women who are looking after these issues. Why aren't there more men looking after and worrying about these human principles? We need to move away from this egocentric elbow society. We are the individualists. We need to be faster and better than the others. We need to move away from competition and move back to cooperation. And we must not lose hope. But hope without action is without value. So we need to take action in order to overcome our impotence and to contribute. It's our responsibility. It's more about the CO2 handprint and not the footprint. Well, the footprint, that was a marketing campaign by BP in order to blame CO2 consumption on consumers. So while they diverted from the consumption of the major oil and gas companies. But the handprint says what we are doing every day in our small lives. It's small things, but also big ones. Everyone can contribute in their own small way, whether it's in the area of law, activism, design, as we're going to hear later. And sometimes I give presentations in schools, and quite honestly, this has really given me most hope, because a young generation is growing up. They are so much more conscious and mindful than we ever were at the age of 16. They're saying, well, I'll put aside my cell phone. It's making me sick. I don't need it. And that really gives me hope. And I would like to show you a picture. I think this is very effective because that is the world. A monopoly game, and above there are white old men who are deciding about our future. They're playing Monopoly, they are exchanging money, building up things, and below there's a lot of people who are bowed and leading small lives. But let me ask you, what if those people were to stand up all at the same time? The monopoly board would be tilted. So we, as consumers, as a society, we have so much more influence than we think if we can get together. We can see this when it comes to eating meat. How big was the choice of vegan products? It was virtually non-existent. Now there's a huge choice in every supermarket. So if we can finally become connected, if we can overcome this division and this estrangement, we do stand a chance. We're not impotent. Because the future lies between us, at a global level, at a communal level, and on an interpersonal level. We need to overcome the distance between each other, and we need to create things between us. That's where the magic lies. And we need to return to humanity and solidarity for each other, because being a human being, we can't do this on our own. Thank you. Thank you very much, Valerie. There are so many things to discuss, so many questions, so many burning issues. So we'll get some reinforcements here on the stage. Let us welcome an expert from the University of Salzburg, she's an environmental psychologist. Welcome, Isabella Olhedeke. So many descriptions have been made for young people, but for everybody who's dealing with this issue that has an impact on this environmental psychology. So since you're fighting for climate justice, well, you're also exposed to a lot of feelings, frustration, there may be fear. If you start understanding what the impact might be, then there's exhaustion. So how can you fight for these things and still remain sane and mentally stable? Well, it is a big challenge, but it's true. If you want to be sustainable, you need to be sustainable yourself. And at first you need to acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to feel powerless. It's okay to feel as if you were the only one who wants to move forward, who wants to change. But it's even more important to stay on the ball and to determine limits. But of course, this will be a marathon. You can't deal with this 24/7. You need to also find things that give you energy and joy and motivation. And at the same time, the most important thing, just like you said, is to remain humane and to recognize we are many. And these events, like the one here today, motivates us because we know this collective efficacy is one of the greatest levers. So we are the many who want to change things. And I think the group can entrain you if you sometimes get the feeling, is there really a point? Yes, because there is a point. It is worth it. we need to find an equilibrium between being active and also sort of taking back and looking after your own energy, because you can't do this when the glass is half empty. Nature really helps us also at the emotional level, at the mental level, so that we need to earth ourselves, we need to ground ourselves. And I have so many friends who are burned out, they're activists, and they're all called up in this, Armageddon scenario. It's all going to go down the drain, but it's not helping. So you need to also sometimes enjoy life. You try to have a sustainable lifestyle, but then why not eat Wiener Schnitzel or fly somewhere? I know this is not something that we should address here, but anyway, trying to be so ascetic that you can't enjoy life anymore, it's not the right thing either. So. I have a theory. I think for many people in the room, the activism and the impact it has on us is going to trigger similar feelings, but of course there's a large group of people outside of this room. So what is the impact of the climate crisis, the way it is portrayed by the media for other groups? Because I think we all know some relatives who know it all, and still they don't do anything, nothing changes. So can you explain this as an environmental psychologist? Well, that's exactly what I studied in my research. Well, the impact is the same. There's this feeling of helplessness and impotence, but the question is, how do you deal with it? What do you make of it? Whether you turn it into something constructive and say, okay, let's tackle this, let's do this, or whether you're frozen and paralyzed, or where you find self-justification, try to talk yourself out of this bad conscience. And to be honest, it's easier than ever before. I'm still trying to find a video on YouTube why this is all climate hysteria, not so bad after all. Well, self-efficacy plays a role. So if you have the feeling that you can make a difference, if your actions are important and meaningful, then you're probably going to adopt a more constructive role. But if your attitude is, well, what's the use? Well, you're going to be paralyzed by fear, and then you try to find reasons why you shouldn't be afraid. So I do understand that in such times, sometimes it is quite challenging to stay on the ball. When you are committed, when you hear about all these negative news every day, but what we know based on research is staying on the ball and being connected, networking, this collective self-efficacy is so important. It doesn't take a lot, and you can change things, and you also need to think about positive examples. So for the people who have maybe withdrawn, and I once heard during a family gathering, well, the airplane will take off no matter whether I'm on board or not, so why not be on board? So how can you convince them and bring them to the good side? Yes, I understand. I wish there were a simple answer to this. Me too. But that's not the way it is. So how can you convince these people? So it is very important to get closer together again in our society. There's been a major division, and I think if it's us against them, we're not going to bring people on board. So it's important to reach most people, the majority of the population who are already seeing that climate change is a problem, even though online sometimes there is the impression that we are just few. No, we are many, but yeah, very few speak out. And I think it is important to pick up people where they're at in their everyday lives, and this tolerance that Valerie talked about, because often people tend to think you can only speak up for climate change if you have a perfect lifestyle, but nobody has a perfect lifestyle. You would have to live as a hermit in a hut. And we need to move away from that, and we need to be able to tolerate different realities. Well, climate protection is important, and maybe engage in less climate harmful actions. So we need to move away from attributing the blame on individuals. We need to recognize how important the political boundary conditions are. Right. So, like I said, I understand that sometimes people feel helpless or impotent, but what's important is to stay on the ball. What's the alternative? Giving up? Definitely not. So what I'm hearing here is that the people that we are seeing here in the room consider this important, this holier than thou attitude. I think people are trying to be more than perfect and then outplaying each other, outmaneuvering each other. You can do even better than that. So, well, forget about perfection in trying to be even better. Well, I think it is hard to find the right balance between not going overboard with perfectionism, because then you tend to give up. Because we want to win over the majority. And if we say you need to be perfect in terms of all of these things, then, well, that deters people. So we can say, let's try to eat less meat, rather than let's all become vegan. Well, I think we can only reach a small percentage if we want to turn them all into vegans. And it's weighing off between this claim to, well, defeat your inner demon, and on the other hand, you also need to be sustainable, of course, yourself. And sometimes, even though you're not perfect, but this gives you energy and resources to, well, stay on the ball. It's close to Christmas. Let's say you haven't bought a gift for somebody you really love. So if this person loves reading, what kind of book would you give him? Well, there's lots of inspirations on the table back there. Okay. Oh, that's all the other books, not yours. Okay, good. Why? Well, warum machen wir es nicht einfach? Die Psychologie der Klimakrise is the title of my book, by Isabella Uhl-Hedicke. I'm not going to ask all of you individually, but if you want to give 4 books to somebody, we have plenty of books here, so nobody will come to this couch without having written a book. So thank you very much for this exchange. Thank you for having taken the time. Thank you for the invitation.
It's so cold. All right, hi everyone. This is Heidi Silvestre, the French glaciologist. I've actually just arrived here in Antarctica. We have an incredible sunset here. But I have a very important message to share with you. Today, Antarctica is responding very, very quickly to climate change. And it's melting tremendously. It's losing hundreds of thousands. It's losing hundreds of billions of tons of ice into the ocean every year, and this is rapidly contributing to sea level rise. Everything that's happening here has a cumulative impact back home. In Europe, we are feeling the heat. Europe has become the fastest warming continent on planet Earth, and unfortunately this is costing human lives, and this is also costing a huge amount of money. The heat wave we got last summer costed about 43 billion euros in direct impacts. So today we need to understand that fighting climate change is fighting for our health. It's fighting for our purse. It's fighting for economy. It's fighting for peace. It's fighting for food security. It's fighting against inequalities. This is what we're fighting for today. There is not one day to waste. The time to act is now. And us, the scientists, we cannot do it alone. This will take each and every one of us. Let's do it together.
Fighting for a planet, well, this can take place in different ways. Heidi Silvestre was here with us in 2023. She freezes, she does research and carries her know-how out into the world. We know about her activities. We know many other different forms of activism. Now we come to a very special form of dealing with the future. Frida Refik Hansen, most cordial welcome.
Wow. Can I just ask you all to join me in closing your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath? And just be grateful to be here with each other right now. It's not every day that you get to be in a room filled with such passionate people who are fighting for something that at least I personally really believe is incredibly important. My name is Freya Refnik Hansen, and I'm a filmmaker and poet passionate about nature and social justice narratives. In my university years, I studied criminology with a focus on environmental crime in the Gothic city of Edinburgh, Scotland. And every weekend, I would roam the streets trying to find any climate march to be able to scream at the top of my lungs in desperation about how our growth is suffocating Mother Nature. I did so until the day I burned out. I had to rise from the ashes and accept that that was not my form of activism. And I soon discovered just how many different paths there are. Still, we all have our own unique superpowers. One might have lungs, another eyes, a third fists, and a last heart. But if you look at the classic recipe of the tale of superhero versus supervillain, you'll discover that it is the superhero who wants to maintain the status quo, while the villain is the one that demands change. Think about that for a moment. Who told us this tale? And why? Today in this room, we have one thing in common. We are, in the narrative of modern society, simultaneously superhero and villain, on this mission to create change, guided by empathy, passion, and knowledge, to save our one and only home, Mother Nature, planet Earth. We can still assure our own existence in symbiosis with her. As her children, she gave unique superpowers. Only we, ourselves, get to choose whether to use for greed or for good. As the kind and forever wise spirit of Jane Goodall echoes, even now, when the planet is dark, there is still hope. In each one of us, there's light. And if we take that light and put it into our superpower and combine it with one another, we may just be able to outshine the darkest of darknesses. A long time ago, when I was a kid, I wanted superpowers, but none of those on TV seemed to fit. Yet as I grew up, a light bulb lit. And I learned that strength is not only physical, it can also take form of intelligence, talent, kindness, or wit. I learned that my superhero powers come with my passion for equality, for all living creatures that will ever live, breathe, exist, or be. That was my prophecy, and therefore this is my plea. I, Enviro Woman, am here to make sure everyone is treated equally. No matter species, social class, gender, race, or sexuality, together equally, there is more power in him, her, them, you, and me than there is in those who are oppressed demographically. Not even close to sarcastically, let me mention, oppressors often possess authority. They engage in oppression mainly for profit and a feeling of superiority. Methodically, mistaken villains like Darth Vader, Magneto, and the Joker once were also treated horribly. So let's stop the mistake of using horrifying policies. I would not beat up the assumed villains so easily before understanding the system that made them or who they originally wanted to be. Still part of this villainous equation is extinction, racism, abuse, and deforestation by big fossil fuel trucks carrying a symbol of Western dictation. One oh so greedy creation. When my Enviro ears hear the commotion in the ocean, it reminds me of my devotion and awakes the emotion that is my superpower potion. Apparently, digging deep into the darkest places of the planet is fine, and slaying the awakened ancient guardians seen as monsters rather than as divine, because new material possessions bring capitalist peace of mind. But is the decline of species, indigenous people, Black, female, LGBTQIA+, and children's lives something we can get behind? Now, we all have our own processing time. Yet, once you're out of that cocoon, a full-blown flying hero, you'll empower sun, earth, space, and moon, and with laser eyes and beaming lips, your words of choice could grasp attention like a lunar eclipse. And this is how they could run. I, superhero name, will fight this battle for anyone. I will never just move on. I will stay strong. I will use this power instilled in me by the powers that be. I will fight for anyone who do not have the same resourcefulness currently, whatever creature that might be. If you throw words of hate and negativity and say it's all down to values and subjectivity, I throw super words of fact and honesty. In the sky, I spell out with my Enviro signal beam equity, empathy. It means that we should all have the same rights and be free. Because basic human rights, nature rights, are key. See, I, Enviro Woman, draw this power from within. So please join me and let the games of change begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freya.
Wir kitzeln jetzt übrigens ein paar Synapsen.
So we might be tickling a few synapses. So I'm going to ask questions in German. Freya is going to answer in English, back and forth, full concentration. Or you can also get some interpretation devices.
You, yeah. So.
Should I put it on?
Yeah. I will ask in German and you can answer in English. So that's what's in our plan. So we follow through with that. So
Yeah,
do you hear me?
Yes.
Achso, jetzt kann ich ja Deutsch.
Now I can speak German, actually. I hope that works. So I said I want to tickle your synapses, but I should tickle my synapses as well. Freya, jetzt once again talk about the access, the approach to this topic, that you've chosen this metaphor of a superhero, a superheroine. Why is it so fitting to talk about climate protection and the topic of the superhero, the superheroine, and bringing it together?
I think right now, the most important reason is that we're experiencing a lot of burnout in climate activism, and I think, or I know, that a lot of people are giving up, and they are feeling hopeless. And I think it's mainly because of the narrative that is being put out into the world, both in the mainstream media, but also even among climate activists, is we're looking at a lot of really horrible things happening at the same time, and you kind of have to choose where to put your energy. And climate activists are often also activistic in other matters. But I think if you feel like a superhero, you'll find somewhere inside of you like that unique superpower. As I mentioned, it doesn't have to be the same, and I think you were also talking about that earlier, that we all are here with different expertise. And if we can use that somehow for good, instead of all trying to do the same thing or all be out on the streets screaming, which we really need as well, but we can't all be out there all the time, then I think that we can kind of get over this burnout again and find that hope and superpower in ourselves.
Jeder darf sich...
So I think everyone here can feel like a superheroine, a superhero. Superheroes also work very well in a collective. This is what we are going to experience during networking, and we are going to support the more introvert of you. So there will be little cards prepared for you. This will be a little task for you, little cards that you can use for networking. The job will be to talk to at least 3 people that you do not know. But in order to be able to talk to them easier, there are also little stickers here where you can write down your superpower and your name, and thus you can show your superpowers, and I hope that every one of us will be able to get at least 3 little cards full. This would be the task. Freya, back to you. You studied criminology. First of all, what do you learn during these studies, and how did you get to the environmental movement?
Question. So criminology can be quite a broad degree. It's sociology, but with a focus on crime. And you can choose whether you want to study more sociology, psychology, law, and with a focus on crime. And I remember I was maybe in my first year at university, and I'd already seen some of these videos online of how chicken were being thrown into drawers in factory farming, and then the Before the Flood Leonardo DiCaprio film came out, and I think at this point I was just like, 6 months into my degree, and I was like, where is the environmental criminology? And discovered that there was one subject in my 4 years that was focused on environmental or green criminology. But I had really great teachers that let me then do my honors thesis on that topic. But it's ironically a lot better in the US with regarding like criminological green studies. But yeah. So it's, you can kind of tailor it to what you think you will be doing with it. And I ended up doing documentaries mainly, and using my interview skills from my criminology degree there.
Vielen Dank, dass du uns heute deine Superkraft gezeigt hast. Vielen Dank an Freya Reffning-Hansen.
Thank you very much, Freya. Thank you for showing us your superpower today. Ich bin Bill.
Great state of Vermont in the United States of America. As you all know, the United States of America is a big problem right now when it comes to climate and energy. While the rest of the world is starting to go in the right direction, our federal government is doing everything it can to slow that down. But I want to tell you that there are lots and lots and lots of Americans fighting hard to make sure we stay on course. We just had this giant Sun Day, not Earth Day, but Sun Day event across America with 500 active actions and rallies and demonstrations in every state. And I want to tell you, because I've been writing about this, my most recent book is all about it, the momentum behind clean energy on planet Earth is very strong. We're getting a third more power from the sun this November than we were last November on planet Earth. We have to keep that going, and we can. As people arrive in Brazil, that's where the fight is. Can the fossil fuel industry slow down or stop the transition to clean energy? Not if we let them. There will be lots and lots of us all over the world doing what we can, even back here in the States. Many, many thanks to all for their work. Do not give up hope. Finally, economics is on our side, and it's the fossil fuel industry that has to scramble to somehow prevent the most logical and beautiful change that we can imagine. Energy from heaven, not from hell.
We just saw it, we just heard it, also apart from the big headlines, sometimes or regularly coming from the White House. So many things are happening. Also in the United States, so many people are active in order to connect people with nature. For example, our next speaker has founded a movement that has already also been firmly anchored in New York, and that has inspired some people to completely change their lives. What is it all about? Let's roll the movie. Harald Dunning is a designer, referring to himself as a serial co-founder. His work revolves around moral standards and the pursuit of belonging. He founded Momkai, the leading Dutch design agency for people who really want to make a difference, and he was the co-initiator of The Correspondent, which focuses on unbreaking news, now one of the largest member-funded journalism platforms in the world. Most recently, he and Rutger Bregman launched the School for Moral Ambition. His philosophy: cultivate calm so that ideas that deserve the spotlight can grow. Radically hopeful, he argues that the real challenge of our time is to reconcile a good life with a clear conscience. Neon Green Network presents Harald Dunning.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to create. I wanted to make something out of nothing. I wanted to give a shape to something. And what do you do as a kid when you want to be a designer? You start graffiti, right? So I put my name up on every wall that I could find anywhere between my school and my home. And one day, I was 17, I threw my tag on the wrong wall. Turned out that wall belonged to some very muscular guys. Way muscular than me. Look at me. No, they were like really muscular. So, and before I knew it, they sucker punched me. So one just threw a heavy punch right in my face. And you can imagine, I was totally shocked, I'll be honest, I had a little tear. And at the same time, weirdly enough, I came to the conclusion, I think they're right. I think what I'm doing makes no sense. I'm not creating something here, I'm polluting. I'm polluting my name out there. And then it dawned on me, like, I want to create, I want to design, but it should be useful stuff, useful to other people. Can I create something that is meaningful to others, that is helping them to move their cause forward? Can I do something that is, that can really move the needle? And it's only later that I learned that there's a word for that, to build movements. And that's what I wanted to set out to do. And that became a really big turning point in my life. And I want to introduce you to my co-founder, who had a similar, well, not similar, he didn't get punched, so spoiler alert, didn't get punched. But he had a big turning point in his life that made us join forces to create something that can help move others forward. Let me introduce you to Rutger Bregman.
Thank you, EARTHtalks Vienna, for welcoming us. And thank you, Huddled. I'm glad your story had a happy ending. And I suppose that every movement starts with a hit. Yours just happened to be quite literal. Now, here's how it happened for me. I had spent about a decade of my career in what I like to call the awareness business. So that means writing articles, writing books, giving talks, posting tweets, standing on many stages, always hoping that someone else would do the actual work of making this world a much better place. And my original plan was to spend another 5 years writing a hefty tome about history's great moral pioneers. But I gotta be honest, after finishing the first part on the British abolitionists, I shelved the project. The moral envy had just become too strong. I no longer wanted to just write about the people in the arena, I wanted to join them. So in late 2023, I co-founded an organization called the School for Moral Ambition. And we like to see ourselves as the Robin Hoods of talent, taking the best and brightest out of their boring corporate jobs and redirecting that talent to some of the greatest causes of our time that we face as a species. Now, at the heart of our work lies a simple belief, summed up best in the immortal words of Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. We aim to redefine what it means to be successful, and we want to turn awareness into action. So let me give the word back to Huddled, because to see what that all looks like, having a designer as one of your co-founders can be pretty handy. Thank you, Vienna.
It started all with a book. We have seen some books around here. You can't be on this stage if you're not related to a book. I'm not the author of this book. Rutger and I worked together already for 10 years. I designed all his books. And he came to me with a manuscript for Moral Ambition, Morele Ambitie. So first, of course, in Dutch, as we are based in Amsterdam. And the first time when I read it, I thought, like, this is not only a book. There's nothing Dutch about this. This should reach as many people as possible. We should start building a movement. And we were actually at that time, just to give you a little bit of context, we were at my design agency, Momkai. So we work from a philosophy of cultivating calm, so only the content can drive you to distraction. We design for organizations all over the world. And next to clients, I help to start new initiatives. So this was roughly 20 years ago. 10 years ago, started The Correspondent with a couple of other co-founders. And we had many authors, including Rutger Bregman, in our staff. And this platform is a platform for unbreaking news. So a lot of news leaves us cynical, divided, and less informed. And we wanted to change that. This is a member-funded platform, ad-free, and all the profits go back into the journalism. And when we started with the correspondent, one of our authors, Rutger, at some point said, like, I'm out of ideas. I'm out of stories, can't I publish them in a book? Then we became a publishing house. And I always thought, like, the one thing that we always wanted to do with the correspondent was write these articles to tell you not only what's wrong with the world, but also what you can do about it. And that's when we talked about moral ambition, we wanted to change that and say, okay, what we can do about it, can we put that on steroids? We need to start something new. This is bigger than the correspondent. We need to find a new initiative. And that became the School for Moral Ambition, because we wanted to connect the book to a way of helping people to act. So we started this non-profit to put your ideals to work. And here you see a few of the pictures. I'm a designer, so I'll have a lot of pictures in my presentation. It will be very visual. But also hopefully to inspire you, to show you a bit of like what could be ingredients of, if you want to start a movement, how you could do that. If you want to change something in your life, how you could start that. So what's the big problem? Well, we know this, of course, as Hammerbacher once said, the best minds of our generation are thinking about how to make people click ads. And that sucks for someone working at Facebook at the time. And of course, that's something that we see all the time, that we have our best and brightest, very talented people choosing rather boring jobs. We have one author. This book is not out yet in neither German or English, but he calls it the Bermuda Triangle of Talent. So what happens at these leading universities is that talented people are very often, very soon, already from junior year on, are being vetted by what he calls the Bermuda Triangle. So banks, big tech, finance, that are trying to get these people into either consulting jobs or finance jobs. And it's almost like a sort of golden cage. And this what Simon wrote is a very insightful way of how that happens in these universities. And my mind was blown when we started working on this project, how that is happening. So for instance, at Harvard, 60% of students now end up in one of these sectors, like Goldman Sachs and all these kind of companies. And we found that, that is actually the biggest waste of our time. These talented people, how could we guide them to be really ambitious about the most urgent challenges that we face as a species? So how do we prioritize? How does this work? So what we really believe in is, could you match the sort of drive and ambition of an entrepreneur with the idealism of an activist? And we haven't developed a certain sort of framework with our research team to how to find those problems. So we look at problems that are really sizable, that are solvable, and that are sorely overlooked. So you could shortly sum it up as how an entrepreneur looks for opportunity in the market, but then on world problems. So if you mix those two, you get a big drive, and also your impact can be really outsized. So even like climate change is on the radar, but you can find different topics within that where you can see, like, where should I focus on? Try to find those elements that are sorely overlooked, that are solvable, that can be scaled up. So how does that theory of change work in action for us? So often I started different movements. I always try to find the groups within the groups. So what I do is sort of memberful design, so I try to create a meaningful member experience for the people involved in the group, that they feel that they belong. And often you see that you have people supporting the larger cause, and then within that cause, you can make certain smaller groups. You have fire starters, like Angie, who started this conference. You have fellows. In our case, those are people that we actually pay to quit their jobs. And very importantly, and I think everyone here can agree, it's always very hard to get the money in, to get funded. As a non-profit, it's really challenging. That's a separate group that you really want to be focusing on as well. I will take you through them. So if we focus on community, what we are now trying to build is a global club of fire starters, really people daring to turn their ideals into action. And if you want to be hopeful, because from the past days that I'm in Vienna, I talked to a lot of activists, and of course, I just came back from New York, where I was living with my family, and it was similarly kind of depressing sometimes to talk with people. I want to show you this slide. This is since spring of this year. So if you think, are there other people out there who want to do something? Yes, they are. We have now 20,000 members in over 140 countries that joined through the platform to find each other, to start new initiatives, to change their organizations from within, or to switch their careers. So that's a hopeful sign. I'm radically hopeful. I'm an optimist. Maybe designers always are. They see little paths and think, oh, we could do this or that. But these are real facts. This is a screenshot of the website of last night. So how do we do that to get that attention? We often say we want to go from awareness to action, but you have to start, of course, with the awareness. You have to get it on stage. Sometimes we do that with really big TV shows, which you can have with Rutger. He's a powerhouse in that regard. But sometimes, of course, we don't have much money. We want to focus on certain things of how can we be present in different places, how can we be seen without us actually all the time being there. So we bought this really big school bus, because we're a school, and we drove around for people that think they might have missed the bus. Well, in the back it says, you found it, this is the bus. and actually for us, I'm Dutch, my mother's German. A lot of us in our movement are from Europe. Once we started this with our team members in the US, and you get people on that bus, it's really powerful how, for Americans, of course, when they were in their youth, when they were on such buses, they had still hopes for what they could do in society. So one of the things you see Julia from Boven there in the middle, she is one of our other co-founders, and we see really the school as a launch pad. So we start new initiatives. This is around our global launch. We start with Peter Singer, the Australian philosopher, a fighter for animal welfare, the Profit for Good conference. So a way of how can we, if money is always the challenge, can we convince companies to give away a net worth of their yearly profits right away to good causes. So we have started this now. This is a new initiative that we wanted set up and convincing companies to commit this really in a big way. So, and it's already, we already have companies signed up for 25 million each. So we saw the first pillar, your fire starters. Second pillar is the fellows, so actually paying people to quit their jobs. We call them SWAT teams of talent. And they go into a cause, work for different organizations all over Europe, and in that way switch their careers or get the help to switch their careers. Often people 10 years in the job, so not only students or something, but really people with a lot of experience, and guide these talented people that maybe were working in marketing or working in different causes to work on really the things that matter for us as a species, for us as a society. So often you could see it as that we are not preaching to the converted, but we are preaching to the privileged. And we create films out of that because it's very important to not only do the actual work, but of course also show it, that people can live through it. Because it's not about us, it's only a movement if it moves forward without us. So we do a little podcast, it's Dutch, no one in the room will understand it, but we are working on English versions. And I'm very happy to say that just this week we started our More Ambition University Fellowships, with our very first university being Harvard. So we went to Harvard in spring, And you can imagine these are the young people that are being vetted by these organizations. And now we can start a summer course paid because we get our funding to make sure that we can pay for all those fellowships. And we are in the talks with Princeton and Yale. And lastly, the last pillar, really important, should always stress that, the funders. And actually how we view the funders is a little community in itself. And especially if you view them through the eyes of moral ambition, these are often people that were very successful in their businesses, they want to give to good causes. We applaud that and we say more is more. You can do more. You can give away more. You can get more of your business friends on board. You can make a much bigger impact. So my work is like making doing good look good. So if you are wondering, how can I actually take action myself? What can I do? Of course, you can volunteer. You can start things. You can go to certain causes. But we noticed like it's not really easy to say like you should work at Greenpeace or you should work at that company. We now look more at it as how can we find a way of that you can talk with each other to find what could be an actual path. And that's not something you do overnight. So we introduced the moral ambition circles. Anyone here, if you want to do that, you can find that online. And you can find your way to make an impact. Because sometimes it means switching a career, and sometimes it means, for instance, if you work at, let's say, Unilever, one of a sort of giant corporate, maybe you can make certain changes in the supply chain that also have outsized impact. So it's not always easy to say where your impact can be. And for this, we have these peer groups. You have 5 to 8 participants. They don't have to be people that you know. We often see it's very successful. Just throw it out there on LinkedIn. It's sometimes even easier if you don't know the people. You have 8 meetings, and of course, we're a school, so we offer all that material for free online, and you can find your way to make an impact. So we try to find different ways of showing people paths to how to make impact, how to find your cause, because how you spend your working life, you have 80,000 hours in your life on average, every person. How you make the choice of how you spend that time is one of the most important choices you will ever make in your life. And it's never too late. You can also do it in your 40s, 50s, 60s. You can also bring in network, you can also bring in the money. So if you want to know more about that, just go here and you'll find all these like-minded individuals that really want to drive change as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harald, for this input. And now that we have a chance to talk to a designer, now's the right time to bring somebody onto the stage who's a designer herself. And I was a fan of your presentation during the rehearsal. I've never seen such happy eyes. What a beautiful presentation. She's a designer, and like you, she works indefatigably for change. Angie Rattay. Great. Your sticker doesn't stick anymore. Well, I guess it's, I spilled some coffee here. Well, anyway. Let's take a look at the situation as it stands. Harald, when I dealt with your School of Moral Ambition, preparing for this conference, well, I only found out later, this is really about a lot, really, to change your life completely. And it's a lot of fun, of course, dealing with that. Is it just a coincidence because you're such fun guys, or is this idea, well, fun needs to be part of this whole movement, right?
Mein Deutsch. So I will answer in English. But no, so we started in Dutch, and the good thing of Dutch, of course, that no one speaks that language, so you can test things out. And we started out with like almost talking about guilt and what you should do, and you have so much more to do. And then we noticed, like, yeah, okay, it's kind of depressing, right? And we noticed over time, like, actually doing good is really fun. You don't have to question your purpose. You don't have to question if it's useful to others. And it's often very collective. So it's not just for you or gaining everything, but it's really working together, right? Like how we are here today. And it's really fun that you notice, because that's also what we try to put in our visual language. It might sound cheesy, maybe I lived too long in New York, but I want to have smiling people. I want to have fun people, because it's kind of sometimes depressing, right? So to really give people energy in that regard. So yes, we are looking very much for on the positive side.
Wir haben in deinem Intro-Video gehört.
In your introductory video, we heard that this is a philosophy to cultivate quiet and silence in order to be able to, shine the limelight or the spotlight on important things. So are you trying to be quiet yourself so that other great ideas can pick up speed and people can work quietly?
I never heard it like that. No, so what I mean with cultivating calm is, like, if you, for instance, we also designed a journalism platform. So if there's no ads there, if it's really sort of calmly designed, if it's very clear, people will read longer, and the only thing they will worry about is the actual content of the story, right? We all know these articles that someone sent to us, and there's this shitload of ads and things shouting at you that all want to pull you out. So I want to pull you in and listen to, I don't know, what Bill McKibben has to say.
Mhm. Kann man mit gutem Design die Welt retten?
Can you save the world with good design?
So a lawyer can change how we in the society can act together. A politician can change them. So everyone has a role to play. And what a designer can do is often help with other people that have a drive, that have an idea, to give shape to that idea, to make it easier to communicate the idea, to make it attractive, to make it iconic. So we're all surrounded by branding every day, right? I used to work also for Nike and Red Bull Globe, all that kind of stuff. And from that, it's almost like my marketing school, right? Like I learned so many things from your giant Red Bull that is, that is here in the house. And I thought, like, okay, they're clearly doing some stuff right, because people are just buying this sugar water. This is weird. But I also felt in my conscience, like, I don't know, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to be doing this. So, but there are bits and pieces that we can take from building a brand and use that for doing good.
Ich höre, ja, man kann vielleicht schon mit diesem.
So I'm hearing, yes, you can maybe save the world with design. Angie, what do you think? Well, you can act as a catalyst. You can help mobilize and maybe also convey content, scientific content, and package it in a way to make sure that it has, more meaning for a broader part of our society, or that it's easy to remember. But you can also find a language or a metaphor, like we did with our superhero metaphor. And tomorrow we're going to have a superhero day. So people will find it easier to approach this issue, because when you talk about the climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, these are issues that are really hitting us hard. And to empower people is a much better way, rather than talking about many things that will possibly be happening out there and that are imminent. So you feel so helpless, and well, the power comes from the people, as we've heard, and we need to remember this, because I truly believe that we have an enormous potential in our population. When I organize the EARTHtalks and work with my team, well, this talent and the potential of people, this diversity, no matter how young or old people are, no matter what social background you come from, this diversity should be used to do good. And I believe that this is really interesting. You need to find the right language as a designer, such as this metaphor of superheroes that helps communicate these things. And even though I said this in a very subdued way that the speakers on the stage are my personal superheroes, but there's also a certain passion for science fiction. But when you look at Captain America, Batman, Superman, these are comics that take up political content. And that's what makes it so interesting. If you think about where Captain America comes from, those were 2 Jewish refugees who founded this. And these are interesting stories and political content, so the metaphor wasn't so unusual. And I'm anticipating your next question, right? Yes, we discussed this before. So tomorrow we have the Superhero Saturday from 10 to 1 in the Design Forum. Free attendance, please do come. You can talk to various NGOs and movements. They're looking for volunteers, campaigners. They're looking for maybe people doing the alternative military service or interns. You can, well, become engaged there and find the motivation that you need. So you're all cordially invited. Well, I think there's another special day on Sunday. Well, actually, I wanted to take a break, but no. On Sunday, there's another item. The wonderful Laura Brown is giving a solo concert. Last year, well, this was a real earworm, the end of the world. She will be giving a solo concert with the End of the World, and yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you there on Sunday. If you're worried about Sunday, well, check out last year's stream. I know it's been long, but anyway, you can move forward, but anyway. If you've heard this song, this one song, you want to hear an entire concert. But let's talk about another aspect. An event of that size has never been easy to organize, but this year it was especially difficult. Why is that, and why did it work out after all? Well, it worked out because of the people. There were a lot of volunteers. So a lot of people may be thinking volunteering is done by people who have nothing better to do, but it's not true. So often in our societies, you need to find the time you can donate, and everybody gives what they can. So we are seeing that there's a huge movement of coming from all backgrounds, a lot of women, of course, who are volunteering, but in these times, of course, it is especially hard because there's lots of wars and crises, a lot of discouraging things, and sometimes you feel impotent, you feel helpless. So I also see that there's a lot of potential in our society, and thanks to partners who supported us, no matter what, we still managed to organize this event because of this human power, these superheroes among our volunteers who made this possible, and a lot of positive people who helped us, such as Matthias Pascottini, who volunteered here to support the Earth Talks in these difficult times, because I believe that it is an important statement, as Isabella said. Okay, often we are put down, but still we need to get up again and continue step by step, sometimes faster, sometimes more slowly, but if you continue along this pathway, then you can sleep with a good conscience, and that's what's so nice about this. We have a little monitor there, a screen, and the timer is running, and we're already in the deep red. So one more question anyway. Angie, if you could make a wish, what would that be? let us become the voluntary fire brigade for whatever issue you choose, whether it's animals or the climate or whatever, no matter what your background is. I think I can believe in you. It is going to work, whether it's at your university, your village, your school, no matter how big or small your circle of friends is. Just do it. Thank you. Angie Ratai. Angie, if I were you, I would do it again. Okay, no. Well, and yeah, if I were in your shoes, I would get up a bit because the applause continues. Okay, anyway, before the last point here, because we are now headed for the final stretch of the Earth Talks, and then, well, you will have your Earth Talks with each other. We'll open the curtain behind us, and we have plenty of food and drink, beverages for you. This is an opportunity to have inspiring talks, and on the tables you will find little cardboard squares with a QR code. And please scan this QR code and fill in the question. It's a very short survey. It's like when you go to the supermarket, if they ask you for your postcode, well, it's more or less like that. It's your postcode, your age, just a few data so that we can tune the program to your special needs. So now a question for the three of you. What thoughts, what feelings do you take back home with you at the end of this official part of the Earth Talks 2025? I think that the various contributions and presentations that we heard today, and thank you very much for them, all are devoted to two questions. The first question is, what am I good at? And the second question is, what does the world need? And if you ask yourself those questions, of course, the answers will be different for every individual, but this will always be a good answer for a fairer, a more social, more ecological, and more livable future. And that's my take-home message. And a big thank you and a lot of gratitude for this fantastic team that has made this event possible, that has made it possible for us to gather here to ask each other those questions. I'd like to thank all 50 volunteers who made this possible. I'd like to thank all of you. I'm really happy and passionate, and in a couple of hours I'll travel to Brazil to the COP World Climate Conference, where thousands of members of indigenous tribes will be doing an indigenous COP. And I think that's it. People come together, and they continue to do so to fight for what they believe in. And that's what I'll bring to the Amazon tonight. You want me to answer the same question? What's my take-home message? Okay. Well, it's incredibly inspiring to see so many people and to listen to what's happening and what's being built up here. This impotence, this helplessness that we're all feeling, it's treacherous, because I believe that so many people have invested so much and they are actually giving their lives to make a change. And many can still turn their life around. I'm looking forward to checking out your website to see what can be done. So every single one who's here and who has devoted 3 hours of their time listening to those presentations and becoming active, I think this is a great source of inspiration. And well, the two of you, I'm really inspired by your presentations and also by Angie. So thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to be here. Thanks. Well, you're 3 hours. Well, I was terrified, but it's only 2.5 hours. Harald, what's your take?
No, I think both of you already said it really beautifully. But I think what I take away from this is you're not alone. So there are way more people, and there are also way more different people that we can reach. Maybe you're a really smart cousin, your brother that is an engineer, or someone else that's a lawyer. You can always turn them into for the good cause, right? So look around you, but maybe also look a bit further. There are way more people that can change things together. And you asked me, like, how can design do that for climate? I was just thinking, often a lot of these design choices are made at the beginning, right? That have such often around 80 to 90% of the effect that they have on the climate are made in the design process. So if we are way more conscious on that, working with engineers, working with designers, everyone, in that beginning phase where everything is very subtle and very delicate, you can make a wildly difference together. So yeah, we're not alone, and I think we all want to have drinks.
We are not alone ist wahrscheinlich die schönstmögliche.
We are not alone is maybe the best segue for the next item on the agenda, because by way of conclusion, we're going to end this official part of our Earth Talks with our big volunteers group picture. So we'll stand up and stand over there, and we will now ask all the volunteers to join us on the stage. We'll take our group picture. Ms. Schmidau, everybody please join us on the stage, and the remainder of you will give us a big round of applause.
Und während wir uns jetzt
And while we are going to take our picture here, I'd like to direct your attention to our screens, because we'll show you all the partners and sponsors of the Earth Talks 2025. So the volunteers and our partners make this possible.
vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank an unsere Volunteers.
Big thank you to all our volunteers. Thank you, all of you, for listening, watching, being part of this event. And a big thank you also goes to our partners. Let's show them once again on the screen. Without our partners and sponsors, we could not have organized this wonderful event. So this takes us to the finale, the last part of the Earth Talk. So if you enjoyed it, we also have some donation boxes, and you're welcome to donate. And now let's go to our wonderful evening. Please open the curtain and enjoy the evening.